Welcome to the World Hong Kong Forum, the English session. We have Nicole Izsak today with us. The big topic is how to save and rebuild Hong Kong. I know it's a very big topic. Both Nicole and I left Hong Kong a while ago. Myself, just a little bit over 1 year ago, and Nicole maybe a little bit longer than that. But Nicole, as you and I know, there are still a lot of people that are detained under the enactment of the national security law. Some of the names underneath here, you know them personally. Some you might not know as well as the others. But how can we rebuild Hong Kong and how can we save Hong Kong? I know it's a big topic, and we want to hear from you from your Jewish experience since you are Jewish. Yeah. So here we go.
Right. Well, I think in the last few years, the last few months, Hong Kong has lost some of its greatest talent, be it politicians and people that were active in the pro-democracy movement, right down to not simple, but simple families, individuals who were working hard, from professionals down to blue-collar workers. They're hemorrhaging talent. And that's devastating, really, for Hong Kong and for individual people. What I have seen, though, is the most incredible capacity building in the diaspora already in the UK, in Canada, in Australia, in America, even where there's not as many Hong Kongers. There's a huge amount of networking and supporting and enabling people to find their footing in these new places. What that's done is kept the capacity of the pro-democracy movement and people with those tendencies together, and will empower and strengthen them to continue in their mission. And it's also supported all those Hong Kongers. I think what it's also done is kept Hong Kong's culture, obviously language, culture, vibrancy together and cohesive. So not only have these events been practical, how to deal with attacks in the UK, or sort of not political, but more social, maybe showing films and stuff. It's also been about getting their young children together in a Cantonese-speaking space. So I think all those things are really essential for preserving Hong Kong communities and Hong Kong culture and keeping alive the dream and the passion and keeping alive Hong Kong in the diaspora. You know, Hong Kong is not dead in Hong Kong. Hong Kong is still there. It's very, very different. We wouldn't necessarily recognize a lot of aspects of it.
Right.
I think keeping that diaspora together is essential, and keeping all that culture and communities together and building those in the diaspora is essential. You know, we've seen it very much with the Tibetan movement. Tibetans in New York, for example, are a very cohesive group. They're very committed to their cause. They're very committed to their communities. They have community centers. They're teaching their children the language and the culture and the religion and the traditions. Those are things, you know, you can kill Hong Kong in many ways, but you can't kill a Hong Konger. You can't crush that spirit. And I've seen that spirit sort of reverberate now globally.
I want to ask you one thing now, since people don't talk really too much about the one country, two systems anymore. So the two systems, so to speak, is it having its continuation outside of Hong Kong as if what we are doing now, the Five Eyes countries that you mentioned? Because even in Hong Kong, you know, I don't think they really celebrate the two systems, because most people talk about the Deng Xiaoping 1.0 model. Actually, the experiment failed royally, right? So we have the obligation to carry it on, right?
Yeah.
Would you agree?
Yes, definitely. It's an interesting thought, really, because the conversation has gone very quickly from this idea that there was one country, two systems to, I guess, no hope, really. I think we'll see it very much over National Day this year, and Xi Jinping coming to put his final seal on Hong Kong by turning up in Hong Kong for this ceremony. The conversation and the sort of political map has changed drastically. From 3 years ago, when we were all very hopeful still that things would change and improve, to now. So it's interesting that, yes, the idea that the two systems mindset is still alive in the diaspora, and it's still alive in people's hopes, I think, in Hong Kong, but realistically in the near future, I agree. I think people feel that the two systems concept is dead. It's gone.
I want to ask about the Jewish community. Now, Israel became a nation again in the 50s, right?
1948.
48. Yeah. That's the year I think Mr. Lai was born, or 47, 48, around that, Mr. Jimmy Lai. Yeah. The rebirth of the nation, put it this way. It takes 2,000 years to have Israel to be rebuilt.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's a long time. I mean, so this is a long game for Hong Kongers. I mean, or is it a good comparison?
I hope it doesn't take that long.
Right.
I think people, I don't know, but I think generally Hong Kongers maybe see this as a few decades, 1 decade, 2 decades, maybe at the end of Xi Jinping, who will succeed him, and whether there will be optimism and sort of change within China and globally. I'm sure people don't really anticipate that it will take that long. But I think for all those years of diaspora, the idea that Israel would be reborn as a Jewish nation state was not really conceived of until the 1800s, and then after the Second World War became a reality for many pressing reasons. But the thing that kept Jewish people's hopes alive was that the mention of Israel every day in Jewish prayers, the return to Zion, and this idea that we would again become a nation state or a nation. And I'm sure, from what I can see, Hong Kong identity, Hong Kong identity is quite new in a way. I've just read Louisa Lim's very interesting book about Hong Kong identity. I'm not sure if you've read it. It's fascinating.
Who's the author?
Sorry, Louisa Lim.
Who?
Louisa Lim has just written a book. Her new book. It's fascinating because I think over the last 3, or maybe since around Occupy onwards, this whole Hong Konger identity has very much changed and now has almost become strengthened with the idea of diaspora. It's almost like it's not people saying I'm from Hong Kong, they're saying I am a Hong Konger, and that means a lot more. I would now say I'm a Hong Konger as opposed to I lived in Hong Kong for 11 years. Because it's about a passion, it's about a political idea, it's a cultural manifestation, it's a language which I don't speak, but it's about something in your heart. And I think Hong Kongers have taken that with them very much so into the places where they've gone now.
May I just ask now, in the First and Second World War, there were a lot of persecution, gas chamber and all that, right? We heard about. How do the Jewish people, they connect and rebuild Israel, since they are spread in all parts of the world, right? There's Jews living in Russia, Jews living in Europe, right? So how do they connect? Unlike in this internet age, the Five Eyes countries, people who are in exile, they can connect easily.
Yeah.
So how do they do it?
Back in the day?
Yeah. Besides the prayer, and then
I mean, interestingly, when I grew up, and I think in every Jewish home I knew, both in North America and Europe, there was a little blue box in the corner, and that blue box was a charity box. People would throw a few coins in, and that was for the Jewish National Fund. That went, at the time, technically towards growing forests and farmland in Israel to cultivate it. And this started pre-1948, before the state was born again. I just think, that there were Jews who lived in Arab countries who never communicated with Jews in European countries. There was isolated Jews in Ethiopia. And they started a walk in the 80s. They had no internet. They didn't even know where Israel was. They had compasses. But they knew if they walked following the compass, I guess I don't know if it was east or west at the time, they literally walked using compasses towards what they perceived as a promised land. And they had no telephones, they had nothing, it was very basic situations they lived in Ethiopia. But there was this draw to walk and to get somehow away from the persecution they were experiencing in Ethiopia, but to get towards, to go towards Zion, to Israel, to Jerusalem. I just think there's always been that emotional pull, and I think with Hong Kongers as well, there's that I'm pointing to my heart and my chest. I think there's that lifeline, that pull between them and Hong Kong.
Right. I guess like whether we could see the old glory days be back it's difficult. I mean, there's still 20 more years to go for the two systems, but most people think it's already dead. So I don't even want to count 2047. It's supposed to be the end of the 50 years. So I guess we have to do our best to retain our culture, our language, our traditional Chinese characters. At the very basic level. And some people talk about building a parliament in exile. I mean, that's an idea, and some other things too. But at the very least, I think it's important to get the people out, those 1,000 names that you can see underneath. If we still have a lot of political prisoners, more than 1,000, Hong Kong is not free. Hong Kong cannot be a free international financial center if this terrible thing keep on happening, or it's persisting.
And I think it's up to the business community. I mean, obviously, generally in the business community, the bottom dollar is always the first most important thing. We see that with businesses who are compromised with working in China, and quite often they will drop a principle or drop a something or another so that they can carry on operating in China. But certainly the business community were scared. I remember with the anti-extradition bill, it's up to them as well to sort of be amplifying this call that they're operating, and remembering that they're operating in a city where there are well over 1,000 prisoners, political prisoners, and tens of thousands who are still waiting for charges to be put on them.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Nicole, for your insight. And definitely in my preview, I talked about you have been an inspiration to a lot of Hong Kongers, especially those who are in exile. They look you up, for support. Even what you share through the social media, it means so much. And you probably is the last audience that made Mr. Jimmy Lai get emotional and get touched from your blessing to him. And while in Toronto, we are showing the documentary called The Hong Konger. Right. Can you mention just a little bit about what this is, The Hong Konger? It's a 70-minute documentary.
It's a very, very moving film about Jimmy and where he came from, and his commitment and his passion, and why he never gave up. Really, it's about his beliefs and what he wanted to stand for. And I think Jimmy always knew that he would end up a victim of his beliefs, because he'd end up a victim of the system there. I don't think people really, even a year ago when Apple Daily was raided and closed down, I don't think people really believed that would ever happen. And it has. And Jimmy was prepared to give his liberty and the last great years of his life to standing up for those principles. And I think it's even more meaningful because it traces the film traces his whole life back to China and coming to Hong Kong with nothing. And he's now got nothing other than a huge amount of support globally and everything he's achieved. But he's sitting alone, probably in solitary confinement in a prison cell. And it's beyond imaginable, really. It really, really is. But he's a great, great icon and hero. And the film is a beautiful tribute to him and to everyone else that worked at Apple Daily and believes in freedom and free speech and free press. Good film. I recommend it.
Yes. And for those with faith or without faith, honestly, we keep praying for the Apple 7 and all the political prisoners. And I wish we all have to work very hard to help. Hopefully, they'll be set free. That's the most important.
Absolutely. And each time I learn that another one of the political prisoners is a strong Catholic, a strong Christian, it gives me comfort to know that they have got a wider belief system that helps them get through the day, really.
Thank you, Nicole.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.